The corn was knee-high on June 5, 1816. By June 7th, it was dead. Not wilted, not stunted. Dead, blackened at the stalk, collapsed against soil that had dropped below freezing in the middle of summer. Across Vermont, New Hampshire, and western Massachusetts, farmers walked their fields that morning and found the same thing. A killing frost. In June, they replanted. The frost came again on July 9th and took the second planting. They replanted a third time, scraping the bottom of the seed barrels, planting with hands that already knew what was coming. August 21st, the third frost, the third failure. 3 plantings, 3 losses, and the seed corn they had carried through winter, the capital of everything, was gone. Here is what no one who lived through that summer could explain. The sky had done nothing wrong. No obvious warning. No strange clouds. The destruction of the 1816 harvest came from a mountain most of these farmers had never heard of, on an island they could not have found on a map, from an eruption that had happened a full year before the cold arrived. And the farmers who survived, the ones who kept their land, their livestock, and their families fed through the winter that followed, had done something the others had not. We'll get to that. Picture the New England farmer of 1816. Not a romantic figure. A practical one. Hands cracked from splitting wood in March. A field ledger kept in handwriting that showed a man more comfortable with an axe than a pen. A barn that smelled of hay and cattle and the particular cold of a New England February. A cold that never fully left the walls until May. His growing season ran from late May to mid-September. On a good year, roughly 110 days to grow everything his family would eat and everything his livestock would need to survive until the following spring. The margin between a full barn in October and a starving household in February was measured not in months, but in frost dates. The last killing frost of spring and the first killing frost of fall, 2 dates that framed his entire existence. He knew those dates the way a sailor knows the tides. He had to. There was no margin for error. What he did not know, what no one in Vermont or New Hampshire or western Massachusetts could have known, was that his margin had already been taken from him. Taken the previous April, on the other side of the world, by a mountain he would never see. On April 10, 1815, Mount Tambora, a volcanic peak on the island of Sumbawa in what is now Indonesia, erupted. Not the way volcanoes erupt in photographs. The way they erupt in geological history. Tambora ejected an estimated 150 cubic kilometers of ash, rock, and sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere, roughly 30 times the volume produced by the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. The sulfur dioxide climbed into the stratosphere, where it reacted with water vapor to form sulfate aerosol particles, a vast, invisible veil that spread across the globe and began reflecting sunlight back into space before it could reach the ground. The veil reduced global average surface temperatures by an estimated 0.4 to 0.7 degrees Celsius. That number sounds small. At the global average, it is small. But global averages do not grow corn. Across New England and eastern Canada, temperatures in the summer of 1816 ran 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit below the historical average for June, July, and August, the 3 months that determine whether a northern crop lives or dies. That was not a modest deviation. That was the complete erasure of the growing season's margin. The Vermont Historical Society records document killing frosts on June 6th, July 9th, and August 21st. 3 frosts across 3 summer months. 3 strikes against a crop that needed every one of those days just to survive a normal year. The farmers did not know about Tambora. They did not know about stratospheric aerosols. They knew only what their fields told them every morning. Something was wrong, and the season was not going to fix itself. By late August, the arithmetic was merciless. Wheat harvests across New England ran 50 to 75% below normal. Hay production, the feed that would determine whether livestock survived the winter, was similarly gutted. Farmers who could not feed their animals through a New England winter faced a choice with no good answer. Slaughter the breeding stock now, or watch it starve. Either way, the future of the farm walked out with the animals. Corn prices in Boston rose approximately 200% between spring and fall. Families who had nothing to sell could not afford what little existed to buy. In diaries and town records from that fall, a pattern emerges that is more unsettling than the cold itself. Families who had depended on a single crop, corn primarily, were left with nothing after the third frost. No seed for next year. No fodder for livestock. No stored grain. The barn empty, the field bare, and a New England winter arriving on schedule regardless. Some families left. Edward Shue's account of the 1816 crisis documents a measurable surge in westward migration from New England in the years that followed. Families leaving thin-soiled Vermont hillsides for the longer seasons of Ohio and Indiana. Vermont's population, which had grown steadily since statehood, actually declined in the census years following 1816. Those who left did not all return, but some stayed. And what separated the farms that found a path through that winter from the ones that did not? That distinction is recorded clearly enough in the town records and agricultural society reports to be worth sitting with. The farms that survived 1816 had not done anything heroic. They had done something quieter than that. They had, before the year gave them any reason to be grateful for it, built their farms around more than one answer. When corn failed in June, farmers who held seed stocks for cold-hardy alternatives turned immediately to what the season would still support. Turnips, capable of germinating in soil as cold as 40 degrees Fahrenheit, reaching harvest in 60 days, went into the ground across failed corn fields through June and July. Vermont Historical Society records document turnip plantings that summer at scales far exceeding normal practice. The substitution was not accidental. It was deliberate, and it was fast, and it was only possible because the seed was already there. Winter rye went in where turnips would not fit. Buckwheat, 70 to 75 days from planting to harvest, planted in July, pulled before October, showed up in farm records across western New England and upstate New York. These were not miracle crops. They were backup options. They were only available to the farmers who had held them. When the seed corn reserves were exhausted after 3 plantings, the seed that remained became the most valuable thing on any New England farm. Town records from 1816 and 1817 document seed corn being traded and shared between neighbors with a specificity that reflects genuine scarcity. Agricultural Society records document formal redistribution efforts. Surplus seed moved from farms where a planting had partially survived to farms where nothing remained. That community seed network preserved something beyond the immediate harvest. Many of the heirloom corn varieties cataloged today by northern seed-saving organizations trace their documented lineage through the farms that survived 1816, preserved because the crisis made saving them a matter of survival. And the corn varieties that had shown the most cold tolerance in 1816, the ones that had produced something, even something small, despite the frosts, those plants were noted. Their seed was saved with particular care. Farmers selected for cold tolerance based on direct observation of performance under stress. It was not formal plant science, but the direction was exactly right. The 8-row flint corn varieties documented in northern New England farm records through the 1820s, shorter, earlier maturing, more cold-tolerant than the southern varieties, are the living record of what 1816 forced those farmers to select for. Some of those varieties survive today. They are shorter than modern corn. They mature earlier. They tolerate cold better than anything bred for warm climate yield. They are what a bad year looks like, carried forward into seed. The farms that survived the year without a summer were not the strongest farms, or the largest, or the ones with the most land. They were the farms with the most options. Multiple crops with different temperature tolerances. Stored seed reserves deep enough to absorb 3 failures. Cold frames, simple boxes of stone or timber with glazed covers that could hold ground heat through a summer frost, creating a microclimate 5 to 10 degrees warmer than the air outside. Neighbors who could share what one farm lacked. The pattern is documented clearly enough across town records, farm diaries, and agricultural society reports that it is not a theory. It is a finding. Diversity, stored reserves, and flexible response capacity. Mount Tambora erupted again in 1967, a minor event, no significant climate forcing. It remains an active volcano today. The stratospheric aerosol mechanism that caused 1,816 is documented physics. Events of Tambora's 1815 magnitude have occurred before in geological history. They will occur again. That is not a prediction. It is a statement about how volcanoes work. The practical response to that statement is not fear. It is the same preparation the surviving farms of 1816 had already made, before the year gave them reason to be grateful for it. On June 5, 1816, The corn was knee-high. On June 7th, it was dead. The farmers who walked those fields that morning had no way of knowing what had caused it, no way of knowing it would happen again in July and again in August. They had no way of knowing that a mountain on the other side of the world had already decided their season before it started. What some of them had, the ones who still had a farm to walk into in the spring of 1817, was not knowledge of what was coming. It was preparation they had built before they needed it. That is what the record of 1816 actually says. Not that the land is safe, not that hard work is enough, but that a farm built around more than one answer has more ways to survive a year that offers none of the expected ones. The farmers who understood that did not understand it because 1816 taught them. They understood it because their fathers had, and their fathers before them. 1816 simply proved it, at a cost that no one who lived through it would have chosen to pay. If your farming decisions, your garden, your land, if any of it rests on a single answer, this is the year to ask what the backup is. Not because Tambora is erupting, because the season is always capable of taking the one thing you planned around. Subscribe to The Quiet Farmer. We cover agricultural history, soil science, and homestead skills, all sourced, all documented, none of it dramatized. And in the comments, does your farm or garden carry any of the short-season heirloom varieties that trace back through years like 1816? Or do you farm in a region where cold tolerance is still the difference between a harvest and a failure? Tell us. The history of what actually works is still being written by the people doing the work.